This episode of Dana Being Dana is brought to you in part by Hits for the Cure, hitting childhood cancer out of the park by covering all the bases.
Hello, and welcome to Dana Being Dana. I'm Dana Michelle, and I'm thrilled you're with us. My show is all about different aspects of the human connection, things that bring us together, and living life intentionally. One thing that has connected my village in recent years has been cancer, and childhood cancer happens everywhere. Globally, it is estimated that over 300,000 new cases of cancer affect children each year. However, this number may be vastly underestimated due to large numbers of undiagnosed cases. Every day in the U.S., 43 children are diagnosed with cancer, with blood cancers being the most common. Joining me now are friends of mine, Jeff and Ashley Bergholtz, to share their experience with pediatric cancer. So your youngest and only daughter, Kennedy, was diagnosed with cancer 11 days after her first birthday.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
We brought her in because we thought she had an ear infection. Started with antibiotics because she just didn't seem right. A few days went by. She still wasn't 100% better. You know, those antibiotics for an ear infection, they turn around real fast.
Right.
And then I thought that something was wrong with her legs. She wasn't putting pressure on it. She wouldn't crawl. She was just laying uncomfortably.
Had she been walking before?
She'd been crawling, but she'd slowed down her movement. All of a sudden, it'd be like, you could sit her down, and 20 minutes later, she's in the same spot, which for a 1-year-old.
She used to follow us around, crawling or cruising. Family room, she'd follow us in the kitchen. Yeah, and all of a sudden, she wasn't moving.
She wasn't moving. Wow. So finally, we got her in. We went to CDH, the Central DuPage Hospital, and they put us in. And by the time we got the diagnosis, it was a few days later. And in a whirlwind of, there's a tumor on your daughter's hip. We're going to put you on an ambulance. We're going to send you to Lurie. You're going to be admitted to the oncology floor.
Wow.
Do you know what that means? Yeah, okay, oncology means cancer. And then then it just like, phew. And then we were there for another 5 days, and then we were discharged. So it was a very long 8 or 9 days in the hospital trying to figure out what it was.
And you went in you thought it was
originally we thought it was a cold.
An ear infection?
Yeah, originally just thought she wasn't feeling well. She had a little bit of a runny nose.
Yeah.
Wow. So tell me about her treatment, her subsequent treatment.
So she had, she's Langerhans cell histiocytosis, which is a blood cancer.
Yes.
And with that, their first round of treatment is 52 weeks of chemotherapy and a steroid regimen.
52 weeks.
So a full year. We would go every week, and then she would get, she had to have a port placed, which is the intravenous in the chest, so that they can just put it right in through there instead of having to go through an IV, because if they get the chemo on the blood or in the skin, it's very painful and can burn.
Okay.
Every week we get steroids, chemotherapy. She would not feel good. And then finally at the end of that first year, it spread out, so it was once every 3 weeks. That was called the maintenance phase.
Okay.
So that was the first 52 weeks, and then she went into remission, which was amazing.
So she had cancer for a year before going into remission
Well,
with the treatment.
So right around the time, spring, she turned 2, and her birthday's in April, so she turned 2, that's around the time, roughly. We had a couple more months after that, right?
Yeah, I think so.
With the maintenance phase, and then...
So I think technically she would have been considered in remission sooner.
Okay.
But with the way we deal with LCH, we wait till they're off treatment to say remission, just based on their relapses. Yeah.
Of course.
And so then, of course, 4 months later, she relapsed. And we found out that she had a bump on her head, and we're like, well, she didn't hit her head. How'd she get a bump on her head? And I walked her into the pediatrician's office. I called him. I said, I'm taking her in. And I walked in. They wouldn't answer the phone. I sat her on the counter. And I said, my daughter needs to be seen. She had cancer, and it's back.
Wow.
And
I think
that was
the advocacy. And you all are my friends, so I know who you are as people and as parents. But I think the advocacy is so important when it comes to treatments and advocating for not only yourself, if you are the patient, but also your children when they cannot advocate for themselves. Yes. I think that is so important. Can you talk about another time where you've advocated on behalf of Kennedy in her treatment process?
Well, just real quick, when you mentioned that, just like one of the things for Kennedy is, and I think a lot of kids, when they have cancer, before they're diagnosed and being treated, is they look fine, but there's something going on there, and so you have to advocate, and so Ashley's tremendous at that, and really fiercely advocated for Kennedy, and as she does for all the kids and anybody else she loves, which is awesome. But in terms of advocating for her, I think really it was when we had that second go around, that when the chemo wasn't quite, there was no response, there was no change after the first few months. And then, Ashley was like, we need to do something that's going to work. And she made sure she voiced that opinion, and thankfully, doctors were willing to listen and said we do have another option. So then she switched her chemo treatment about 3 months in the second round. So, because she ended up being on for about 16 months total the second time.
Wow. I'm sure this experience has taught you so much about your family, about each other. How many children do you have total?
3.
2 boys, in addition to Kennedy, her older brothers. What has this experience been like for them?
I think it has taught them immense compassion. Immense compassion. They are already compassionate kids in general, but they are the first to make sure someone is okay if they aren't feeling well. They are the first to be concerned when something isn't going right. But in regards to our family, it became very clear that they knew if Kennedy was sick or needed to go to the hospital, it was, oh no, she's got to go to the hospital. Mom, when are you coming home? Why do you have to go again? So there was that definite disparity because how much time I could spend with the boys.
Right.
I can't spend as much time because I'm taking care of her. And so that was it splits the family when it comes to that time.
And so like she primarily was the person who would go to the hospital with Kennedy, and I was always very focused, and we both made it a goal to try and make sure the boys' lives stayed as normal as possible through all of this. So still doing, whatever activities, baseball and things that they were doing. And so I was running around taking the boys to places, this activity, that activity, friend's house, whatever, while Ashley would be occupied for, that second regimen was 5 days a week, once a month. So that whole week, they'd be basically gone. So,
And what was that like on your marriage? How has this cancer diagnosis impacted your marriage?
I think during it, we just went.
Yeah.
During it, you just go.
Right.
And it's when you get to the end and all of a sudden there's that kind of sigh of relief and all of a sudden you're like, oh, the pressure's not there anymore. And we look back and we're like, okay, now we actually have to focus back on us because we weren't. It was all about survival. It was all about what we were doing. He was a rock at home and I was the medical one. So we had our roles and we followed our roles.
Yeah, and it's like, sometimes you get caught up in it, and we could talk about the time and like, oh, when things happen, but time becomes kind of nebulous. You lose track of time and you look back, it's like, wow, that was 3 months have gone by since we've had a night where it was just the two of us going out for dinner or something like that. And it's probably even longer than that, but you just completely lose track because you get focused on making sure your kids are okay. And I think out of it though too, it was oddly we gained a deeper appreciation for each other, but we weren't always able to, spend time to let each other know that we were stuck in doing our duty, so to speak, to take care of things.
What do you appreciate most about each other through this experience? What have you learned? There's something about the other that you didn't know going through this experience.
For me, what I mentioned just a little while ago is just Ashley's absolute fierce loyalty and dedication, advocacy, any word like that you want to apply to it for the people she loves.
Yeah, that's my girl.
If she cares about you, she's going to do whatever it takes to make sure that things are taken care of right for you, whether that be for Kennedy, taking care of our boys, or, now that we're a couple of years out of things, is making sure that our relationship as a couple and then our dynamic as a family is, strong and solid and balanced again.
And what about you, Ashley?
I think it took me that time to really appreciate how calm Jeff is. And he was able to bring me back down when I would be on that brink. He's definitely the calm to my crazy. Yeah. And I really appreciated that in that time because he could get the kids to, especially the boys, to settle down when I'm like running around with a chicken with my head cut off, trying to get everything done.
What is Kennedy's current status?
She's in remission.
Great.
She is currently 3.5 years off treatment and doing amazing.
Yeah.
So we are so thankful. We are incredibly blessed. We get to say that out loud.
Yeah.
Can we bring her out? Can we talk to her?
Sure.
Love to have her. Hopefully she won't be too shy.
Awesome. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
This episode of Dana Being Dana is brought to you in part by Hits for the Cure, hitting childhood cancer out of the park by covering all the bases.
Welcome back to Dana Being Dana, where I am talking to good friends of mine, Jeff and Ashley Bergholtz, about their experience with pediatric cancer and their daughter Kennedy, who's joined us now. Hi, Kennedy.
Hi.
How are you, pretty girl?
Good.
Good. You are one of the most bravest, most courageous little girls that I know. How old are you?
7.
7. You're so big. What do you remember from your cancer diagnosis?
Do you remember going to the doctor?
Going to the doctor.
You remember going to the doctor?
What
Yeah.
was the name of your hospital?
I'll chime in for her because
Sure.
she's shy, is that
Yeah.
we see any commercial with Lurie. And that's my hospital. There's where my doctors are.
Is that true?
And Ronald McDonald House was also huge when we stayed for chemo. And she'd be like, can we go to the McDonald House today? I want to go there.
Tell us more about your support system when your family was going through this ordeal.
It's so important. It's amazing.
Yeah.
People stepping up and taking my kids and offering meals and gift cards. And it was no longer, I just want to do this. It's you tell me what you need and I'll do it. That was massive.
Yeah, it was just great, like how so many people stepped up, and lots
And you
of times.
see who your true friends are.
Right.
You keep that circle, and that circle grows tighter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like amazing how some people we didn't know as well who stepped up, and then we developed really great relationships with, and still are friends with. You know, it's just amazing how that can happen. You know, a blessing in disguise, meeting more people you didn't know, I guess.
Yeah. What kind of learning challenges or disabilities? I remember you all talking before about how when you were in the hospital, when you were undergoing treatment, there wasn't a time for colors and numbers and ABCs because there were just more priorities now. Kennedy's now, she's 7 and she's in
Going into second.
going into
Going
second
into?
grade.
Second.
Second grade, that's right. And so what challenges have you had to overcome? Or there's an educational aspect that gets impacted by cancer that I don't think people focus on when it comes to pediatrics.
Yes. Not only is there an impact on when they're so young and you just don't focus on it and teaching them, but then also what the chemo does. So she has some short-term memory issues that we've really struggled, tried to make that connection. She does currently have an IEP where we are working on her reading and literacy.
Based on the cancer.
Based on her
That's
cancer
one of the
and,
qualifications, yeah.
and being just behind because we didn't have the opportunity to do the work.
Right.
And her body didn't have the opportunity to do the work it needed, and neither did her brain.
Right.
Yeah, preschool got interrupted too, you know, because she was in those years she'd be missing a week at a time, so some of those things too were disruptions for her.
Yeah.
You okay?
Can I ask you one more question, Miss Kennedy? Yeah. What advice do you want to give a little kiddo who's been diagnosed with cancer? Anything you want to tell them about your experience?
I hope they can fight through cancer.
Yes, I agree. That's great advice. Parents, what advice would you give to parents who unfortunately may be in your shoes, you know, in a year from now or tomorrow even, by taking their kid to the doctor for any type of visit?
Don't walk away till you get the answer. Stand your ground. If you feel instinctually that there's something wrong, go for it, and find the right doctor who will listen to you. And outside of that, find the support system, find that support circle, whether it be through organizations, family, friends, because not only do you need the support, but your family will need the support.
Yeah. And I think for us as a couple, but particularly me, kind of proud in the sense that I don't like to ask for help a lot or reach out for help about family stuff. You know, at work I'll ask 1,000 questions, but family stuff I'm like, I've got this. But don't be afraid or embarrassed to reach out for help and take advantage of great organizations. I think you'll be talking to Stacy. So Cal's Angels was huge for our family, as were a couple other organizations that really stepped up and provided us with support we needed, whether in so many different ways, coming to the hospital and visiting the kids there, like Kennedy, and bringing pizza for them or little toys, right? Did you like getting toys when you were at the doctor? Did that make it better? So and then, just so many things that people are willing to do. Just don't be afraid, because whether you realize it or not, you need that support.
Yep.
Your tank can only go so long without getting refilled, so to speak.
We talk all the time about showing up and being there, and it takes a village. So blessings to you. Thank you all so much for being here. We'll be right back.
This episode of Dana Being Dana is brought to you in part by Hits for the Cure, hitting childhood cancer out of the park by covering all the bases.
Welcome back to Dana Being Dana, where we are talking about pediatric cancer and advocacy. Cancer is the #1 killer of children, and cancer in children has been slowly growing over the last few years, but medical advancements have helped to vastly improve the survival rate for children from 58% in 1978 to 84% now. Despite this fact, childhood cancer research remains consistently underfunded. Joining me now are Chloe Peterson, founder for Hits for the Cure, and Stacy Wahlberg, co-founder and president of Cal's Angels. Chloe, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Thank
so happy
you
to be
so
here.
much for being here. I appreciate you.
Of course.
Just like Kennedy from the last segment, you were diagnosed with cancer
Yes.
at the age of 1. Can you tell us about your experience?
When I was 1 year old, my parents took me in for my 1-year-old checkup, and they found a lump on my stomach, and they wanted to look into it a little bit more. It turned out I actually had something called Wilms tumor. It was a really rare cancer at the time.
Wow.
And luckily I was living in Peoria, and that's right where the Midwest affiliate is for St. Jude's. So thankfully they got me right in, and then I ended up with Wilms tumor from the age of 1 to 5, roughly around 5 to 6.
Wow. So you were battling cancer from age 1 to age 6.
Yes, I was.
Have you been in remission since then?
I am. I'm now
Yeah.
100% cured, which is so awesome. It takes about 10 years after to officially say that. So now
Oh.
I'm past that mark, which is so incredible.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Can you tell us a little bit about your treatment, the types of treatment that you had from
Yeah.
ages 1 through 6?
So I mainly was in chemotherapy. My parents had a really tough decision. I was in about stage 2, stage 3 borderline. I had a few really hard surgeries around the ages of 2 and 3. I kept kind of going back and forth or where I would be in remission and then kept going back. So the doctors wanted me to do radiation, but my parents really knew the kinds of developmental issues that could happen from that. So they really were against that, and they wanted to just get as many opinions as possible just because they knew how that could affect me. So we actually ended up not doing radiation and foregoing that. And so that was able to help me get to where I am now and not have any of those issues, which I'm just so blessed to have. So chemotherapy was able to work for me, and along with all the different surgeries I had.
Stacy, Chloe was talking about not having some of the mental, developmental, or learning disabilities associated with cancer and cancer treatment. With the families that you service and support through Cal's Angels, can you talk a little bit about some of their experiences and how cancer can impact children from an educational and learning perspective?
Sure. So overall, we do like to use statistics. They say 80% actually do have some kind of secondary effects. So Chloe's extremely lucky, and radiation does play a very high rate of why there are disabilities later on, and even secondary cancers is something that can come out of radiation. So unfortunately, that's where we are today because it is so grossly underfunded that all these side effects from the different chemotherapies, they do rear their ugly head at some point a lot of times with the children. So Chloe is a very small percentage, and we're so thankful that she's not, having any of these secondary, whether it's a side effect, a learning disability, developmentally delayed, or even a secondary cancer.
Did you have any side effects or any long-term effects?
So there are some that could potentially come later in the future, but for right now, I haven't really had any.
Yeah.
Definitely mental, definitely family. You do see those side effects come around just from having cancer and seeing that effect on your family and effect on your mental health, especially at that age of the 5 or 6 when you're in school. It definitely does affect you. So definitely around that part, but as far as the physical developmental side, nothing there, which is, again, just so lucky to have that.
What do you remember most from your experience? You were so little.
Yeah.
And so you probably don't remember specifically, obviously, the diagnosis and things like that, but 6 years old, you probably have some memories. What do you remember most from your experience?
So I remember going, and they're just long days. The long days were the hardest parts, and I remember my mom would get me candies and things like that and treat me at the end of the day. We called tumor balls, and that's how I remember them. I envisioned them as these bouncy little colorful balls, and that's how they would describe them to me, that we need to get them out of my stomach. I remember the doctors that are actually still there and I still work with in my own charity, who are just so incredible. And I remember the weight rooms, because that's where we
spent a lot of long hours. So I remember those kind of things more, and I just remember the long, tiring days.
Yeah. Stacy, you have had personal experience with pediatric cancer, and it's one of the reasons why you started Cal's Angels, and we talked about you in the last segment. Can you tell us about your personal experience with pediatric cancer?
Yes, I am the stepmother to Cal Sutter, who passed away at the age of 13, diagnosed at the age of 12, actually today.
Wow.
15 years ago, diagnosed. And he was diagnosed with a very, very rare form of leukemia called acute myelogenous leukemia. It's very rare in children. It's considered the adult form. It's not the children's form that you normally hear. And because of that, the odds were stacked up against us from out of the gate. And on another segment, we can talk about why Europe's statistics are so much higher than the United States. But in the United States, it's about a 10 to 20% chance of survival with his diagnosis that he had.
Wow. What stage was he in when he was diagnosed?
Acute myelogenous leukemia. With leukemia, there is not a stage. There is no stage.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about your support system going through this process for both of your families and what that was like?
Well, I think it's really important to mention that most people, unless you've gone through it, they don't realize that cancer affects the entire family. Yes. So for me, my role was very different than Cal's parents. I was the one who was at home a lot where there was 5 other children, and trying to balance what they were going through, the fear, the loneliness, the unknown, is so incredibly scary for all the other children. And then when one of Cal's siblings looks you dead in the eye and says, I want to get cancer, because they see all the things that Cal's receiving,
right. The attention,
and they can't,
if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah. Material and, and other things that he was coming home with, all the different material things that they wanted cancer as well. And we were like, whoa, no, yeah. That's not what we want to do here.
Right.
And so, but that's not something people understand a lot. The focus goes so much on the sick child, as it should. Mm-hmm. However, the siblings are always forgotten, and they're truly just as important as, the sick child. So it's that balance.
Absolutely, absolutely. One thing that I appreciate about you ladies is that you've taken a cancer diagnosis and the situation that has impacted your family in such a profound way and done so much good with that. You started Hits for the Cure, you started Cal's Angels. Chloe, I'll start with you. Can you tell us about Hits for the Cure?
Absolutely. So it kind of goes hand in hand with what we talked earlier about. I just want to be able to help other children. We talked about how I was just so blessed to be able to not have these developmental issues that other children have. I was able to go on and play softball in college for some time. I played in high school. Division I.
Division I. Yes, say that.
I was able to play Division I softball, and I verbaled when I was 15. So I had some time in high school when most were applying for colleges where I had this free time, and I wanted to use that time to be able to give back, because I just knew I was so blessed with this town of softball that I just wanted to use that time to give back. I knew that was a time that I was given that I could finally do that. Yeah. So that's when I created Hits for the Cure with my high school team, and then it just blew up to something that I'm just so proud of. But the whole reason I wanted to do Hits for the Cure was to be able to use those talents I've been so blessed with, to be able to hopefully have these other children one day be able to be grown up and use those talents that they've been blessed with, and just have that cycle keep going. And that's the whole mantra behind Hits for the Cure, is to just be able to use what you're passionate about and help other children be able to find those passions one day too, that I was able and blessed enough to have.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Stacy, tell us about Cal's Angels.
Well, first, hats off to Chloe, right? So young and being able to start something, and you're so passionate about it. So thank you. Please keep up the good work. But at Cal's, we saw firsthand the devastation of families losing jobs, losing homes, everything becoming, at home, everything just blowing up, if you will. And so we wanted to try to somehow make a difference. And so Cal's Angels is, we do wishes, we raise awareness, and we fund research. So we like to say Cal's Angels is going to war against pediatric cancer.
That's great. That's great. What's next for Hits for the Cure?
So we recruit high school softball teams and baseball teams, and we also recruit college teams. I just want to keep growing this. Right now it's mainly in Central Illinois, which is where I'm from, Peoria, Illinois. I want to take this in Naperville. I want to take this up to the Chicago suburbs. I want to grow this as big as I can. And I really think that this is something that anybody that has a passion and wants to help and give back can really just grab onto and help. And I want to be able to, if anybody wants to be a part of this, I want to help them be able to help out their community, and we can really just grow this and make it as big as we can.
Is it true that pediatric cancer is so underfunded compared to cancer overall?
Yes, it's grossly underfunded, and unfortunately our government only gives, it's 4% of federal funding goes to cancer. So if you think of it as 4 pennies on every dollar goes towards our children who are our future.
Right.
These are our future leaders. So I feel like it's very backwards, but unfortunately you will hear people say not enough children are dying. And for me, I completely disagree, because if one child is dying, that's too many.
Amen. That's right. How do you feel that others can best help those dealing with a cancer diagnosis? What do you recommend in terms of supporting those who are diagnosed with pediatric cancer?
I think that the greatest thing is to be able to help children be able to find their passion. I think that's the thing that was able to help me, is people helped me show my passion through all of it, to be able to hold on, to let me play softball, to let me have that. And I want to be able to, with my charity, that's my goal, is to be able to, I guess our mantra is to be able to hit childhood cancer out of the park by hitting a home run, covering all the bases. So getting cancer cured might be hitting a triple. I want to be able to hit a home run and have that kid go on and live the happiest, healthiest life. So that might be by having them follow their passion, being mentally healthy in their life, being developmental, like being able to just really help develop them as a full person. And I really hope that they can follow their passion. And I think that the best thing is to be able to introduce kids with cancer to realize that cancer isn't their whole life.
Stacey, so many families come to you with a diagnosis of pediatric cancer. What advice do you give those parents representing Cal's Angels?
Honestly, I think out of the gate, it's a conversation of, you will get through this. Life will return to some kind of normal at some point. But, literally it's strap in, educate yourself, become more aware of any kind of, information that you can. I do laughingly say stay off the internet because the internet can be a bit overwhelming. But you need to find your people. There's villages out there of cancer, other organizations that are phenomenal, like Chloe, and there's, we're very lucky in the Chicagoland area of how many different foundations there are out there that help you walk through this. But just as long as you have the people side by side with you to help you advocate and ask the questions and carry around a pen and paper at all times.
There you go. Chloe, what advice would you give a kiddo like Kennedy, who's so young and has her whole life ahead of her, about your experience? I think you're someone that she can look up to. You are a future for her. What advice would you give her?
To just do what she loves and to just follow her dreams, because I think, again, cancer shouldn't define you, and I think that's the thing that I've tried to make my life be about, is that cancer hasn't defined me, and instead it's made me, I'm a survivor, and I'm so proud of that, and I want other children to be able to look at me and see that cancer isn't a label on me. It's been something that's made me grow and be an even stronger person.
Well, I think what you're doing with Hits for the Cure is incredibly important. Keep
you.
up the good work. Thank you so much for all that you do, Stacey, with Cal's Angels.
Thank you.
And thanks to both of you ladies for joining me here for this episode. I really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Dana.
Thank you so much for having us.
According to the American Cancer Society, over 11,000 children will be diagnosed with cancer in the U.S. this year. Of these, the majority will be under 15 years old. I think health is one of the number one things people take for granted, as we have all learned tough lessons in a pandemic era. I am passionate about us all taking our health seriously and getting checked out when something seems like it is off. Thank you to my guests for joining me today to share their courageous stories. And I want to personally thank Chloe and Stacey again for starting organizations focused on showing up for others impacted by cancer. Please support these organizations and people in your life who are battling cancer, especially pediatric cancer. Hopefully you have been entertained, if not encouraged or inspired. I do not promise to be an expert, nor do I have all the answers. I'm just Dana being Dana. See you next time.